I never imagined that standing up to my HOA over a bridge to my brother's island would unravel a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme involving local officials, developers, and my meddling neighbors. How could I have known that fighting for the right to visit my leukemia-stricken brother would lead to FBI raids and secret recordings that toppled an entire criminal network? I was weeding the flower beds when the official HOA letter showed up. Bright orange paper, their way of saying, this is serious. My hand shook as I read, unauthorized structure must be removed within 30 days. They were talking about the wooden footbridge I had built last summer, the only direct path to my brother Daniel's island house on Lake Clearwater. This can't be real, I whispered, collapsing onto the porch steps. Daniel's battle with cancer had only gotten worse. That bridge cut a 40-minute drive into a 3-minute walk. He needed me nearby, especially after chemo sessions on his rough days. I immediately called the HOA office, but no one picked up. Of course not. Susan Crawford only answered the phone when she felt like it. I'd have to face her directly at tomorrow's board meeting. Sleep was impossible that night. I tossed and turned, playing out every worst-case scenario. Without that bridge, how would I get Daniel his meds, his food? How would I reach him in an emergency? The community center buzzed with low murmurs when I arrived the next morning. 20 neighbors sat in rows of metal chairs, 5 board members perched behind a long folding table. Susan Crawford sat in the middle, her highlighted bob cut neatly arranged, reading glasses dangling from a thin chain. Next item, Susan announced, not bothering to look up from her agenda. Enforcement actions for unapproved structures. I raised my hand. I'd like to discuss the violation notice regarding my bridge. Susan's eyes narrowed. Margaret Cole, 18 Willow Creek Road. Yes, we've documented your unpermitted construction. The bridge violates 3 separate covenants. But it's on my private property, I protested, standing. It connects to my brother's island, which isn't even under the HOA's jurisdiction. The shoreline falls within our authority, Susan replied icily. You failed to submit proper plans for approval. My brother has stage 3 leukemia, I said, my voice cracking. That bridge is his lifeline. I take him to treatments, bring him meals. Personal circumstances don't exempt anyone from the rules, Susan cut me off. The board's decision is unanimous. From the corner, Kyle Bennett smirked. He'd moved in next door just 6 months ago and immediately started complaining about my bird feeder, my recycling bins, and now the bridge. Yet somehow his oversized RV parked in the driveway never got a citation. I'll appeal, I said firmly. You're welcome to try, Susan replied with a tight smile, but construction on that eyesore stops immediately and removal begins next week. As the meeting wrapped up, Jessica Ramirez, a young mom from down the street, lightly touched my arm. This happened to me too, she whispered. They made me tear down my kid's treehouse last month, said it was too visible from the lake. How can they keep getting away with this? She asked. Susan's husband plays golf with the county commissioner, and half the board works for Clearwater Development. They run everything here. Walking home, I noticed Kyle standing on his deck, photographing my yard with a telephoto lens. When our eyes met, he didn't even bother to act casual. He just grinned and waved. That afternoon, I called Daniel. The HOA is forcing me to take down the bridge. What? Why? His voice sounded faint, weaker than last week. They claim I didn't get the right permits, but I checked. The county told me I didn't need any since it doesn't cross public land. This isn't right, Maggie, Daniel sighed. Without that bridge. I know, I said quickly. I'll fight it. Meanwhile, I'll bring you groceries by kayak. In winter? That's not safe, Daniel protested. Maybe I should just sell this place, move closer to you. Don't you dare, I shot back. That island's been in our family for 3 generations. Mom and Dad left it to you because they knew how much you loved it. We'll find a way. After hanging up, I spread my property maps and HOA bylaws across the kitchen table. There had to be a loophole. 3 hours later, I found one. The HOA only controls construction visible from community property. If I could prove the bridge wasn't visible from any common areas, they couldn't force its removal. I grabbed my camera and set out, photographing every angle. The bridge was shielded by trees from the community dock, invisible from the main road, and barely noticeable from the water if you were looking for it. My phone buzzed just as I finished. An unknown number. Hello, Miss Cole. This is Andrew Price. I understand you're having some trouble with your property. My stomach clenched. How did you get my number? Small community, he chuckled. Listen, I might have a solution that works for everyone.
We've been eyeing waterfront lots in your neighborhood. If you're willing to sell, we can make this HOA problem disappear. I'm not selling my property, I said flatly. Think about it, Andrew replied smoothly. We'd pay well above market value. Your brother's place too. Enough for both of you to relocate somewhere more accommodating to your needs. I hung up without answering and immediately called Daniel. Did someone from Clearwater Development just contact you? Yes, Daniel said, alarm in his voice. How did you know? They called me too. Something's off here. That night, I dug into Clearwater Development's history. They'd been buying up lakefront parcels all across the county, transforming quiet residential communities into luxury resorts and condo complexes. Their latest project had stalled because one stubborn owner refused to sell. The next morning, a construction crew appeared on my property. A tall man in a hard hat approached with a clipboard. Margaret Cole, we're here to begin removal of the unauthorized structure. You can't do that, I shot back. I filed an appeal. The HOA has to review it before taking any action. The foreman shrugged. My orders come directly from the board president. You'll have to take it up with her. I planted myself firmly on the bridge. I'm not moving. This is private property, and you don't have permission to be here. The workers exchanged uneasy looks. The foreman stepped aside, made a hushed phone call, then returned. We'll postpone for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with the sheriff if necessary. After they left, I drove straight to the county records office. I needed clarity on what authority the HOA actually held over my land. The clerk pulled up my deed, her brow furrowing. That's strange, she murmured. What is it? I asked, leaning closer. According to this, there's a pending petition to redraw the shoreline boundaries in your area, filed 3 months ago by, she squinted at the screen, Clearwater Development. My blood went cold. What does that mean for properties like mine? If approved, the new boundary would place all shoreline construction under county jurisdiction, requiring permits that previously weren't necessary. And those permits would be approved by the county zoning commission, she confirmed. And that commission is chaired by Commissioner Phillips, the same commissioner who golfs with Susan Crawford's husband.
Driving home, the puzzle pieces started falling into place. My phone rang. It was Jessica. "Margaret, come to my house right now. There's someone here you need to meet." 20 minutes later, I sat in Jessica's living room with 4 other neighbors, all of them victims of suspicious HOA violations. Marcus Johnson had been forced to dismantle his dock. Elderly Mrs. Green was fined weekly for her so-called non-conforming garden. The Patel family had been denied a sunroom addition, while Susan's identical structure sailed through approval. "This isn't random," said a man I didn't recognize. "I'm David Harris, former HOA treasurer. I resigned last year after finding irregular payments to a consulting company that doesn't exist." "Why didn't you report it?" I asked. David said grimly, "The day after I spoke with a county investigator, my house was broken into. Nothing stolen, but my financial records were scattered everywhere." The message was clear. "So what do we do?" Mrs. Green asked, her hands trembling. "We fight back," I said, surprising myself with my own determination. "Together, starting with saving my bridge." On the drive home, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, tailing me too closely. Turn after turn, the vehicle stayed right behind. My pulse raced as I pulled into my driveway. The car slowed as it passed, a black SUV with tinted windows, the Clearwater Development logo stamped on its door. Inside, I locked every door and window, peering through the blinds. Across the street, Kyle Bennett stood in his driveway, phone pressed to his ear, staring straight at my house. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Selling would be easier than fighting. Some battles aren't worth the cost. The early morning darkness was thick as fog as I slipped out my back door. Armed only with a flashlight and my phone camera, I crept toward the bridge. If they planned to destroy it today, I needed proof of its condition beforehand. My phone buzzed again. "Daniel, are you okay? Couldn't sleep, worrying about you." I typed quickly. "I'm fine, documenting the bridge before they come. Stay put." The wooden planks groaned under my steps as I crossed, recording every detail. The hand-carved railings Dad had taught me to shape. The reinforced supports built to withstand flooding. The careful design that preserved the shoreline's natural beauty. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around, heart hammering. "Who's there?" I called, my voice small in the vast darkness. No answer, but the flashlight beam caught movement in the bushes near my property line. A shadow slipped into the trees. I bolted home, locked the doors, and dialed the non-emergency police line. Officer Carter arrived half an hour later, looking bored as he scribbled a few notes.
"Probably just animals, ma'am," Officer Carter said with a yawn, "but we'll keep an eye out during patrols." "This isn't the first strange thing that's happened," I pressed. "Someone's been watching my house, following me." "Any proof?" he asked. "Well, no, but call us if you see something concrete." He handed me his card and left. By sunrise, a different kind of threat appeared. 3 trucks from Riverside Construction rumbled up my driveway. Susan Crawford stepped out of her black Lexus behind them, clipboard in hand. "Miss Cole," she called cheerfully, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I hope you've reconsidered your position. The crew is ready to remove the unauthorized structure." I stepped onto my porch, my phone secretly recording from my pocket. I filed an appeal with documentation proving the bridge doesn't violate any HOA covenants. You can't legally touch it until that appeal is heard. Susan's smile stiffened. "The emergency board meeting last night denied your appeal. Notice was posted on the community bulletin board. At night? That's not proper notification, I countered. As a property owner directly affected, I should have been informed personally. Rules are rules, Susan snapped, her patience thinning. Now please step aside so the work can begin. I have a court order, I lied, gambling she wouldn't call my bluff. Any attempt to remove the bridge before the county hearing next week will result in contempt charges. Her eyes narrowed. Show me this order. My attorney has it. He'll be here within the hour. I stood tall, hoping she couldn't hear my pounding heart. Or you can proceed now and explain to a judge why you ignored due process. The construction foreman shifted uneasily. Mrs. Crawford, if there are legal issues, we should probably wait. Susan glared at him, then at me. Fine, you have until Monday. Then that bridge comes down, court order or not. As the trucks pulled away, my knees nearly gave out. I hadn't expected the bluff to work, but it bought me precious time. My phone rang immediately. Margaret, it's David Harris, the former treasurer said. Jessica told me what's happening. Meet me at Maple Ridge Coffee in 20 minutes. The small cafe in the next town was nearly empty. David sat in the back corner, a manila folder in front of him. I've been gathering evidence since I resigned, he explained, opening the folder. Financial records with irregular payments. Board meeting minutes that had been altered. Property assessments that magically changed after owners refused to sell. I scanned the documents, my coffee untouched. This is serious, fraud at minimum. It gets worse, David said, lowering his voice. Clearwater Development isn't just about luxury homes. Their parent company holds stakes in casinos. The lake resort is only phase 1. Phase 2 is a private entertainment complex designed to skirt gambling restrictions on county land. How's that even possible? I asked. State Senator Whitman introduced a bill last year creating a loophole for so-called hospitality entertainment zones. Clearwater's CEO was one of his top donors. I leaned back, stunned. So my little bridge is blocking a multi-million-dollar casino project? Your property and your brother's island are the missing pieces, David confirmed. Without them, they can't secure the continuous shoreline they need. That's why they're desperate. No wonder they won't back down, I muttered. But why not just offer more money? They tried that. David's smile was grim. But people like you and Daniel, people with roots and principles, you're their worst nightmare. On the way home, I called Daniel. We need to meet in person, not over the phone. I've got chemo today, he reminded me weakly. I'll be too sick. Then I'll come to you. Don't talk to anyone about your property. No one. Getting to Daniel's island without the bridge meant taking my kayak. I packed waterproof bags with documents, a sweater for him, and his favorite soup. As I dragged the kayak to the water's edge, a familiar black SUV crept by. This time I clearly saw Kyle Bennett in the passenger seat. The lake was rough, waves splashing over the sides, but I pushed forward. By the time I reached Daniel's dock, my arms ached and I was soaked. His pale face at the window made every stroke worth it. You shouldn't have come in this weather, he scolded, helping me inside. We've got bigger problems, I said, unpacking the documents. Much bigger than we realized. Daniel listened, his worry deepening with every detail. So that's why they keep calling me, he said quietly. A man named Greg Taylor keeps raising his offer for the island. Yesterday he mentioned my medical bills, like he knew exactly what they were. A chill ran down my spine. Have you told anyone about your finances? Just my insurance provider and the hospital, Daniel said, and you, of course. I thought of Kyle watching my house, the anonymous texts, the car tailing me. They're monitoring us somehow. We spent hours reviewing our options. Selling wasn't one of them. This land had been in our family for generations.
Fighting the HOA alone felt impossible given their connections, but going public might work. Local news loves a David versus Goliath story, I suggested, especially when developers are harassing cancer patients. Daniel looked doubtful. That's a big step, Maggie. These people clearly have power. So do we, I insisted. Truth is power. Community is power. As night fell, I reluctantly prepared to leave. The lake was dangerous in the dark, but I needed to get home. Stay, Daniel urged. It's not safe. I can't, I said. If I'm not home when they show up tomorrow, they might start demolition anyway. Halfway across the lake, my kayak light illuminated something floating in the water. My stomach dropped. Wooden planks, railing posts, my bridge. They'd already begun tearing it apart. I paddled furiously toward my property. From the water, I saw flashlights darting along the shoreline. Power tools whined in the night air. Snapping open the waterproof case, I called 911. There are people trespassing on my property, destroying my bridge without permission, I reported, my voice shaken. We'll send someone right away, the dispatcher promised. I stayed low in my kayak, hidden by darkness, watching as 3 figures worked fast to dismantle what remained of the bridge. One of them was unmistakably Kyle. The others I couldn't identify. 20 agonizing minutes later, police lights strobed at the end of my driveway. The trespassers scattered instantly, vanishing into the woods. Officer Carter, the same one from that morning, met me at shore. "You're sure they didn't have permission?" he asked skeptically. "Of course I'm sure," I snapped. "It's my bridge on my property." "Well, according to HOA records, this removal was scheduled with your consent," Carter said. "Signed documentation and everything." My blood boiled. "They forged my signature. That's illegal." "That's a serious accusation, ma'am," he replied stiffly. "Do you have proof?" In that moment, I realized just how deep this went. Police, HOA, developers, all connected. "Not yet," I admitted, "but I will." When he left, I surveyed the damage. The bridge was half destroyed, unsafe to cross. Reaching Daniel would now mean the kayak or a 45-minute drive around the lake. Inside, I collapsed on the couch, exhaustion pressing down on me. Then I noticed something on my coffee table that hadn't been there before. A business card from Clearwater Development. A note scrawled across it. "Final offer. $750,000 for your property, $1.2 million for your brother's island. Offer expires tomorrow." Someone had been in my house. Hands trembling, I checked closets, bedrooms, every corner. Nothing else was disturbed, but the violation left me shaken. I called David. "They broke into my house," I whispered. "Get out of there," he said immediately. "Come here. Bring your evidence." "I can't," I argued. "If I leave, they win." "If you stay, you might get hurt," David warned. "This isn't just about a bridge anymore, Margaret." As if to punctuate his words, the lights went out.
My entire house plunged into darkness. Across the street, every other home still glowed with electricity. My phone buzzed. Last chance to accept our offer. Things get complicated after tonight. I grabbed my emergency flashlight, documents, and laptop, then slipped out the back door. I wouldn't hide forever, but I wouldn't run either. I was headed to Jessica's house. Together, we had built a case stronger than any bridge. As I crept through backyards to avoid being seen, a new resolve filled me. They had destroyed my bridge to my brother, but in doing so, they built something else. A bridge between neighbors who'd had enough. And that connection might be strong enough to topple the entire corrupt system. The next morning, I gripped the steering wheel tighter as my old motorboat bounced over choppy waves. Without my bridge, the 40-minute detour around the peninsula had become my daily route to Daniel. The engine sputtered. I smacked the dashboard. "Not today," I muttered. I couldn't afford repairs, not after Susan had fined me $750 for so-called improper bridge removal procedures. When I finally reached Daniel's dock, he was sitting in his garden, paler than the day before, his favorite blue cardigan draped over his thin shoulders. "You won't believe what happened at my doctor's appointment," he said, forcing a smile. "Dr. Nguyen says I'm responding to the new treatment." I hugged him carefully, hiding my worry. "That's amazing. I brought groceries and mail." While he rested, I sorted his medications into the weekly pill organizer, my hands trembling from exhaustion. 3 hours of sleep wasn't enough, but I couldn't let him see my weakness. "Stop pretending you're okay," Daniel called from the doorway. His voice startled me. "You look worse than I do, and I'm the one with cancer." I sighed. "I've been digging into something strange. Remember when the HOA suddenly raised fees last year for infrastructure improvements, but nothing actually changed?" Daniel sat across from me at his kitchen table, studying my laptop screen. "Look at this," I said, turning it toward him. "I requested public records for all HOA vendors. This company, Clearwater Landscaping, got $487,000 over 3 years. For what?" Daniel frowned. "Planting a few bushes?" "Exactly. And guess who owns it?" I pulled up the business registration. "Jonathan Bennett, Kyle's brother-in-law." Daniel's eyes widened. "You think they're skimming HOA money?" "It gets worse." I pulled up property records I had downloaded. The HOA has been buying up foreclosed homes through a shell company, 6 in 2 years. And guess who's been triggering the foreclosures? Daniel's voice dropped. "Kyle Bennett. He works at a mortgage servicing firm. Every foreclosed home was processed through them. Tiny errors in paperwork the homeowners couldn't fight. Thunder rolled as rain hammered the windows. I packed up my laptop. I need to head back before this storm gets worse." "Be careful with that information," Daniel warned, walking me to the door. "These people sound dangerous." I hugged him. "I'll be fine. I'm meeting with Jessica and David tonight to plan our next move." By the time I docked at the marina, rain was pouring in sheets. Shivering, I sprinted to my car, never noticing the black SUV parked under the trees. The moment I opened my front door, I knew something was wrong. My security system light glowed red. Inside, drawers hung open, papers scattered across the floor. My desktop computer was gone. Hard pounding, I backed toward the door, but froze when I spotted a single sheet on the counter. An official HOA violation notice. Unauthorized investigation of board activities. fine, $2,500. My phone rang, making me jump. Sophia's panicked voice spilled through the line. "Margaret, Marcus just called me. 2 men showed up at his house with an eviction notice. They changed his locks while he was at work." "That's impossible," I said, locking my own door. "He pays automatically." "They're claiming his last 6 payments were improperly processed. He has 3 days to vacate." I peeked through the blinds at the empty street. This is retaliation. They know we're on to them. "There's more," Sophia whispered. "I followed Kyle yesterday. He met with someone from Clearwater Development. I took photos." "Send them to me. I'll come to your—" "You don't understand," she cut me off. "I overheard them. They were talking about permits for a resort. They specifically mentioned Daniels Island as the last piece. They need his property, Maggie." The puzzle clicked into place. The bridge demolition, the harassment. It was all to isolate Daniel, to pressure him into selling. "I'm calling him now," I said, fumbling with my phone. But there was no answer. My doorbell rang. I nearly dropped the phone. Through the peephole, 2 men in dark suits stood stiffly beneath umbrellas. One held up a badge that glinted in the porch light. "Miss Margaret Collins," a deep voice called. "FBI, we'd like to ask you some questions about Clearwater HOA." My breath caught. Had Susan reported me, or was something bigger happening? Inside, the taller agent introduced himself. "Special Agent Torres, this is Agent Michaels. We've been investigating Clearwater HOA for 8 months. Money laundering, wire fraud, racketeering." My jaw dropped. "You're not here to arrest me?" Agent Michaels almost smiled. "No, your bridge complaint actually helped us. You've been documenting things we couldn't access without warrants." Relief washed over me, until Torres added, "But our surveillance shows Susan Crawford was tipped off about the investigation this morning." My blood turned to ice. Daniel was alone on his island. "We have agents heading there now," Torres assured me. But I was already grabbing my keys. "He's not answering his phone," I said, bolting for the door. "We'll drive," Michaels insisted. Rain lashed the windshield as we sped toward the marina. Lightning lit the roiling waves. "Tell us everything," Torres urged. I told them everything. The bridge, the fraudulent foreclosures, the resort scheme. They need Daniels Island. Without it, they can't build. At the marina, my stomach dropped. My boat's fuel line had been sliced clean through. "This wasn't an accident," Michael said grimly. Torres barked into his radio. "North Shore units, expedite, immediate threat confirmed." I spotted a neighbor's kayak tied nearby. "I'm not waiting," I said, untying it. "Miss Collins, that's too dangerous in this storm," Torres called. But I was already shoving off into the churning lake. "Follow by road," I shouted back. The kayak bucked violently under each wave. Rain stung my face. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the distant shadow of Daniels Island. My arms burned with every paddle stroke, but fear pushed me forward. As Daniels Dock came into view, 2 unfamiliar black SUVs stood parked near his house. Lights glowed inside, shadows moving across the windows. I tied the kayak beneath the dock instead of on top, then crept through the dripping underbrush toward the back of the house. Voices carried through an open window. "The treatment center in Switzerland is the best in the world," a smooth male voice said. "All expenses paid, Mr. Collins. Just sign the papers." "I told you." Daniel's voice was weaker than this morning. "I'm not selling my home."
Your condition requires specialized care, another voice pressed, Kyle's. Care you can't afford without our help. Peering through the kitchen window, I saw Daniel backed against the counter. Kyle Bennett blocked one doorway while a man in a gray tailored suit thrust papers toward him. "My friend will be here soon," Daniel said, chin raised defiantly despite his pale face. The suited man chuckled. "Your friend is currently busy with the FBI, a misunderstanding we arranged." Rainwater clung cold to my skin as I tried the back door. Locked. I grabbed a heavy flower pot from Daniel's garden. The crash of breaking glass froze everyone inside. Climbing through the shattered window, cutting my hand on the glass, I straightened. "Actually, I'm right here," I said, stepping into the kitchen. "And now I understand exactly why you were so desperate to destroy my bridge." Kyle spun, rage twisting his face. "You should have minded your own business, Margaret." Daniel's eyes widened in relief and fear. "Step away from him," I ordered, planting myself between Daniel and the men. "Miss Collins," the man in the suit adjusted his tie coolly. "James Wilson, Chief Development Officer for Clearwater Development. We're offering your friend a very generous package." "You mean you're trying to bully a cancer patient?" I shot back, after isolating him by cutting off his access to help. "Business is business," Wilson shrugged. "This island is the centerpiece of our new resort. Every other property owner has signed." "Because you forced foreclosures through Kyle's company?" I countered. Kyle's face went pale. "You have no proof," Kyle snapped, though his eyes flicked nervously to Wilson. "Actually, I do," I bluffed, "including recordings of your little lunch meeting yesterday." Wilson's composure cracked. "Where are these supposed records?" "Safe, with people who will release them if anything happens to us." Daniel's voice strengthened. "She's telling the truth." Kyle stepped closer, menacing. "Do you even know who you're dealing with?" "Why don't you tell me?" I challenged, gripping a kitchen knife from the counter. Wilson's smile turned cold. "Clearwater Development doesn't take no for an answer, and neither does Senator Whitaker." My mind spun. Senator Thomas Whitaker, the very lawmaker pushing waterfront development bills that gutted environmental protections. "So the senator is part of this?" I stalled for time, praying the FBI was close. "James, shut up," Kyle hissed. "It doesn't matter," Wilson waved dismissively. "Once we have this property, the project moves forward." Kyle yanked Daniel's arm roughly. "Just sign the damn papers." I lunged forward with the knife, not to stab, but to threaten. "Take your hands off him." Suddenly, bright blue lights flared outside. A booming voice echoed. "FBI! The house is surrounded! Come out with your hands up!" Wilson's face drained of color. Kyle let go of Daniel like he'd been burned. "You led them here," Kyle spat at me. "No," I said calmly, "your own greed did that." At 5 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Agent Torres. "Turn on your TV now." I fumbled for the remote. There it was. Susan Crawford, in handcuffs, led from her pristine colonial home as neighbors gawked in their bathrobes. The anchor's voice filled my quiet living room. "Breaking news! FBI raids homes of Clearwater HOA board members in massive fraud investigation." Stunned, I sat frozen,
coffee cooling in my hand. This wasn't just about my bridge anymore. By noon, my doorbell wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, neighbors, even strangers wanting answers. I ignored them all and drove straight to the FBI field office as Torres had asked. "You've given us the missing pieces," she said, spreading photos across a steel table. "Look familiar?" The images showed Susan and her husband meeting with developers in upscale restaurants, exchanging envelopes, reviewing maps of Daniels Island. In one photo, Senator Whitaker himself pointed at architectural plans. "We've been tracking the money for months," Torres explained. "Over $4 million funneled through shell companies owned by HOA board members. Your neighbor Kyle, he's actually a disbarred real estate attorney convicted of fraud in another state." My stomach dropped. But how did they think they could steal Daniel's land? "They nearly did," Torres admitted. "The plan was elegant." "We need you to do something difficult," Torres said, sliding a small recording device across the table. "The community meeting tonight. We need Susan to incriminate herself publicly." "You want me to be bait?" I asked flatly. Torres nodded. "We need to show the community was victimized, not just your family." That evening, I walked into the emergency HOA meeting with the wire taped to my ribs, heart hammering. The community center buzzed with angry voices. Sophia squeezed my hand as I passed, a silent gesture of support. Susan stood at the podium, somehow still composed despite the morning's raids. "These accusations are completely unfounded," she declared to the packed room. "The board has always acted in the community's best interests." I waited until she finished before standing. "Is that why you demolished my bridge to isolate my friend while developers pressured him to sell his island?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Susan's smile tightened. "Your unauthorized structure violated clear bylaws, Margaret. This has nothing to do with your friend's property." "Then explain these," I said, as Sophia handed out copies of documents to stunned residents. Property assessments undervaluing Daniels Island by millions, fake environmental reports claiming contamination, and bank records showing payments to board members from Clearwater Development. Susan's husband leapt up. "Where did you get those? That's confidential information." "They're public now," Marcus called from the back. "Evidence in a federal investigation." Susan's perfect mask cracked. "You ungrateful people! Do you have any idea what that resort would have done for your property values? We were all going to benefit by forcing out my dying friend." I stepped closer to the podium. "By changing zoning laws behind closed doors? By coercion?" "Your friend was offered fair compensation," Susan snapped, her voice rising. "If he wasn't so stubborn." "So you admit the bridge removal was tied to the development plans?" I pressed. The room fell silent. Susan realized her mistake too late. Her eyes darted to her husband, who was already edging toward the exit. Susan's husband blurted, desperate now. "He said no one would look too closely if we handled the problems quietly." The double doors at the back swung open. Senator Thomas Whitaker himself strode in, flanked by FBI agents. "I don't believe I promised any such thing, Susan," he said coolly. Her face went ashen. "James, tell them you approved everything." The senator straightened his tie. "I'm afraid Mrs. Crawford has been under tremendous pressure. I'm here to announce my office's full cooperation with this investigation." As agents moved to detain Susan and other board members, I noticed Kyle slipping out a side door. Would he escape while the others took the fall? And what would happen to Daniel's Island now that the truth was coming out? "Not guilty," Susan's lawyer proclaimed to reporters on the courthouse steps, the footage playing on my phone. My grip tightened until my knuckles went white. How could this happen? "The case isn't over," Agent Torres assured me over the phone. "The judge only dismissed 2 counts. Fraud and conspiracy charges are still moving forward." But I felt defeated. 3 months of legal battles had drained my savings and energy. Daniel's health had worsened from the stress, and Kyle Bennett had vanished without a trace, likely somewhere tropical, with no extradition. "They're coming after your land next," Sophia warned that evening, bringing dinner she'd cooked for Daniel and me. Susan's husband had filed countersuits, claiming emotional distress and defamation. "Let them try," I said, though fear twisted in my stomach. I couldn't afford more legal fees. The kitchen table was buried under threatening letters from expensive law firms. That night, I couldn't sleep. Standing at my window, I stared across the dark water at Daniel's house. Without the bridge, I'd have to wait until morning to check on him. A flicker of movement caught my eye. A flashlight beam swept across Daniel's porch. Someone was there. I dialed 911, then sprinted to the dock, shoving my small boat into the water. The motor coughed in the cold night air as I raced across the bay, panic rising. Halfway across, headlights appeared on the Peninsula Road. Police, but taking the long route. I'd reach Daniel first. Cutting the motor early, I drifted silently to his dock. The beam of light moved inside the house. Grabbing an oar, I crept up the path. The back door stood open. Inside, drawers banged, papers shuffled. I raised the oar, heart pounding, and stepped into the kitchen. "Freeze!" I shouted at the hunched figure rifling through Daniel's desk. The flashlight swung toward me, blinding me. Margaret! That voice, not an intruder. Marcus Johnson. "What are you doing here?" I lowered the oar, confused. He held up a thumb drive. "Finding our salvation," Daniel called me.
She said he remembered something important. Blue lights flashed outside as police arrived. Marcus quickly explained. Daniel kept backups of everything. He has video of Kyle and Senator Whitaker discussing how they faked environmental reports to force the sale of his island. The evidence changed everything. Within weeks, the senator's protection crumbled as he faced his own indictment. Susan's remaining defenses collapsed when her financial records were subpoenaed, revealing offshore accounts filled with development money. But the biggest surprise came from Mrs. Foster, our elderly neighbor who'd been keeping meticulous records of every HOA meeting for 12 years. Her detailed notes provided the timeline prosecutors needed, showing how the scheme had evolved from petty corruption into organized fraud. "I always knew that woman was trouble," Mrs. Foster said when I thanked her. "Started with her giving citations for my bird feeders while ignoring her friends' violations." At the final court hearing, I sat with Daniel, now using a wheelchair, but determined to face Susan himself. The judge's words rang through the hushed courtroom. This court sentences Susan Crawford to 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and misappropriation of funds. Susan refused to look at us as she was led away, her designer suit replaced by prison-issued clothes. 6 months later, we gathered on a perfect spring day to celebrate. Not just Daniel's remission, but the completion of a new, wider bridge connecting our properties, built with funds from the HOA restitution settlement. Should we cut the ribbon? Sophia asked, champagne in hand, surrounded by neighbors who'd stood with us through everything. Daniel shook his head, smiling. No need for ceremony. This bridge isn't just for me and Margaret anymore. It's for everyone. And he was right. The settlement had transformed our community. The new HOA board, led by Marcus and Mrs. Foster, rewrote the bylaws to focus on actual community needs rather than petty rules and power games. Children played freely across properties without fear of citations. Neighbors exchanged plants from gardens that once would have violated approved species lists. Daniel's Island, once coveted by developers for its natural harbor, had been placed in a conservation trust, protecting it forever. You know what I learned from all this, Daniel said as we walked together across the bridge, his strength returning more each day. Sometimes the thing someone tries hardest to take from you becomes the very thing that saves you. I watched a family picnicking on the shoreline below, new residents in what had been Kyle's house. Their laughter drifted up on the breeze. Do you ever regret standing up to them? Marcus asked, joining us at mid-span. Knowing what it had cost, I looked at my brother, at our community reborn, at the bridge that connected us all. Some victories aren't measured in courtrooms or settlements, but in the simple freedom to walk across water to help someone you love. Not for a single moment, I answered, and I knew it was absolutely true.